You know, it's interesting to see how people react to Meher Baba. Most people are so engrossed in worldly affairs that they are not interested at all. Some people are annoyed and ridicule him because of their religious sentiments. And a few people who have had a little more exposure might say, how arrogant of Meher Baba to say that he was God in human form. After all, nobody knows for sure if there really even is a God. To say that nobody knows if God exists is actually a statement of dishonest agnosticism. Because if you say that nobody knows that God exists, that means you know that nobody knows. But that would be incorrect. You have dismissed the possibility that somebody might know and experience that God exists. As for us, we have our conviction in Meher Baba due to a reaction, a response to his love. And it is an individual experience that is common for all people who follow Meher Baba. It begins when you hear his name, you begin to think of him. You begin to have interest about his life and work. You want to find out more information about him. We read his messages and his discourses and his superb explanations about the spiritual fabric of the universe. And of course, all of this just makes our conviction deeper and deeper. And then naturally, we want to visit the places that are closely associated with his life and work. Baba had said that these places are saturated with his divine impressions. So we like to go there and imbibe that and add that to our experience. Of all these places in the world, the most important are Meherabad, Meherazad, and Meherabad in between them. From 1923, Baba began working at Meherabad, engaging his Mandali in that work, while simultaneously working on them and through them. He began gradually, within a year, thousands of people started coming to Meherabad. He opened the hospital and clinics, the free dispensaries, the schools for the children, which culminated in the Prem Ashram. The major part of Baba's work with women, with the focus on Mera, was done at Meherabad. The expansion of the ashram on the hill where they lived at the time in 1938, when he brought in so many Western women to join the ashram, to be there before World War II started. So that whole dynamic was happening at that time, up until the New Life. He worked with the God Mad and the Musts there. So many of Baba's discourses were given there. The divine theme was given at the meeting, the Sahavas there. The final declaration happened there. So did the universal message there in 1958. The Sahavas programs in the 50s, all of that, but most importantly, his tomb shrine was established there, which we now call his samadhi. And that's important, not just because we don't go there out of sentimentality. His samadhi is flanked by the graves of most of his closest women disciples. But we don't go there to worship the dead or out of a sentimental memory necessarily. It is the place. The physical body of the avatar was the vehicle through which God interacted with humanity to suffer for them and accomplish his work. It's a great thing. It's beyond description. It is there. It is the most important place in the world. Also of importance is Meherazad. Baba began staying at Meherazad with a small core group of disciples from 1944 occasionally between his travels. He also did seclusion work there. He did seclusion work at Meherabad from 1923 into 1946. Then after that, as Meherabad became less quiet and more busy, he did most of his seclusion work in that area at Meherazad. And also, he would engage musts in that seclusion work, bring many musts to Meherazad. He would still do the poor programs, the washing of the feet of the destitute, the lepers, other poor people, and the seclusion continued. Especially became more intense towards the end of his life. Baba really came to stay, we would say, permanently at Meherazad after the second car crash. So in 1957, he came to Meherazad to stay more permanently. It was then mostly between Guru Prasad in Pune in the summer and Meherazad. And in the end, he stayed at Meherazad. His seclusions became so extreme that last final seclusion in the last year was called the exclusion seclusion, because most of the Mandali even did not have the opportunity to see him. He said it was that important. Remember the story that Baba would tell when he was on night watch once, and he was thinking, because he was always dealing with the correspondence from the Indian people, specifically the Hindi-speaking people, Bob asked him one night, "What are you thinking?" And he said, "Baba, your lovers, they don't expect anything from you, but they would love to have your darshan. Why don't you give them darshan?" And Baba's response was, "What will they see? This old, worn-out body." And then Baba made this gesture. This was his symbol for his seclusion, because he used to have to beat his thighs to maintain his link to the physical body, he said, while he was engrossed in his spiritual work on the higher planes. So to maintain his link, he would do this. So his symbol was this. He said, "What will they see? This worn out body? This is the real thing I'm giving them." So that happened at Meherazad. And then Baba dropped his body in his bedroom at Meherazad. So to us, that is the second most important place in the world. Baba's bedroom at Meherazad, where he completed and released his universal work. Since Baba dropped the body, many of us began going to visit Meherabad and Meherazad and spend hours with the Mandali who live their lives with him and for him exclusively, to take in all of those stories. Through them, we got the gist of Meher Baba's humanity. But not only that, because they also had that great conviction in his divinity. So it was a very special opportunity for us to be there during those years. They were the most natural, honest, loving, the epitome of people we would want to be. This went on for more or less 40 years, gradually dissipated as they passed away. But Baba's divinity is still there at these places. They are very important. That God doesn't just fizzle away like this. This impact of his divine impressions is tremendous. And it is there. Why do we see gradually ever increasing numbers of people going there for pilgrimage? They feel it. It is there. But all these external means of pilgrimage are important essentially for one reason, and that is that they greatly help facilitate the real inner pilgrimage. And it's an interesting time now that we've come to where Baba Samadhi, for the first time since he dropped his body, is now closed to the public because of this coronavirus issue. We left, Debbie and I left on March 20th, leaving India like Mr. Magoo. We had no idea what was going on. The country was closing, shutting down, closing up. That very evening, that morning arti we attended was the last arti. We didn't know that. We just were bumbling through, and we left. And as we were at the airport, Modi spoke to the country and said, tomorrow we're shutting the whole place down. And the other people who were still there, didn't make it out yet. It was a good place to be, but rather hot in the summer. So I look at this whole experience as a Baba giving us this nudge to turn towards the inner pilgrimage. We've had years and years of this, and now it's very natural for us just to continue having the inner remembrance of Baba. Now, I will say, let's open it up for questions now.
Currently in my life, I've been having a huge struggle with particularly my faith in Baba, but very recently, a couple of days ago, I completely feel like I overcame all those feelings. And only about the past, immediately afterwards, I've gotten very, very physically sick. And so I have the option of waiting 6 days, which I don't think I can make it that long to go see a doctor. Or I was presented with the option of going to an emergency room today. And I even dreamt last night about a hospital. But I'm not sure if it's like, I don't know if it's silly of me to ask myself if it's, what does Baba want? Does he want me to wait? Does he want me to go today? And I'm just kind of really reeling over all this because I'm more than willing to sit here for 6 days and get worse and worse and worse. But I'm not sure if that's what he wants. And I feel like I'm driving myself crazy because, I can never really know what he wants. And that's really my question.
Okay. So I would advise you, Baba was very practical. especially when it came to medical concerns. And so, yes, you should go to see a doctor. Yes, definitely. Don't don't gamble with your health. Bob was very concerned about people taking care of their health. Very concerned.
Thank you.
Most practical. He was most practical.
Yeah, I figured that's what he would want too. I don't think he wants me to sit here for 6 days and just get my fever worse and everything.
No, you don't need to have a deep fever delirium to have a closer spiritual experience with Meher Baba, although some people claim it was helpful. I wouldn't try that. Not necessary. All we can say is stick with Baba. You will everyone has their own sanskaras. People go through things. They wear out and you're on your feet again and you go on. Just to have conviction in Meher Baba, according to him, takes millions of lifetimes. It's not a random thing. It can't ever be that. You have to have so much past experience of distraction and what would you say? Unfruitful efforts to be able to have that conviction. It's something that you have earned for lifetimes. It's a very valuable thing. As the years go by, you continue to pay attention to Baba. All of that conviction will become deeper and deeper. It's just a natural thing. What we do have, although the age of the Mandali is gone, it's interesting. While Baba was alive, we only had 2 newsreel bits of footage from 1932 and then the Louis Van Gasteren film in 1967 that give us audio-visual examples of Baba. Now, there are some bits of footage that we might be able to match with some audio recordings, but that we hope to do in the future. There won't be much. But after Baba dropped his body, technology started to advance further, and because of that, we have a lot of fine recordings of the Mandali. So don't feel like you've missed them, because in the comfort of your own home, you can really enjoy so many of these recordings of the Mandali on YouTube. It's a wonderful thing, especially Mani. If you listen to Mani, she was like the ideal person. And Erich there in the hall telling stories. It's wonderful. It's a nice thing.
Okay, we have in the queue, we have Alan M, and then Prakash, and then one of our Susans, and then Jack. So Alan M.
Yes.
Go ahead.
How you doing, Peter?
Hi.
Good to see you. Jay Baba. I was just wondering if you could speak on Padre, your experiences with him, and his statement that I've heard him say on one of these YouTube videos I saw where he's like, I have no sentiments. Thank you.
I was very close to Padre. And yes, he was a man beyond sentiments. He told me, I learned very soon, mister, that I could not intellectually figure him out. So I gave that up. There's only one solution, and that is obedience. Somebody asked him about love once. He said, don't ask me about love. I don't know anything about love. Go and ask those people at Meherabad. I know only to do the work he has given me with my 2 hands. And that was Padre. Not that he wasn't a person who felt, but he was a person who understood that your personal indulgences in feeling were absolutely meaningless. It was only Baba's work to him that mattered. He was one of the 4 pillars of Meherabad. He was Baba's disciple from 1922 1922, early in 1922, he came to Baba. You know, he was Mara's first cousin. And we were fortunate to have him with us till 1982. Next.
Question. I was just going through one of the web pages here by David Carter, and I'll just read that out to you, and hopefully you can help explain that a little bit. This page here is from meherbabamanifesting.com, and he's basically talking about silence and various aspects of it. And this particular sentence struck me. Baba says, the end of all suffering would be the giving of the word. That would be the release for me. When I break my silence, my suffering will come to an end, and the world will know and feel that I'm God. My suffering is physical, mental, and spiritual. I have suffered much and will have to suffer much more till I break my silence. When I break my silence, it'll be the end of all suffering. So that's a sentence which I thought intrigued me. When I break my silence, it'll be the end of all suffering. The question is, with Baba without physical body at this time, is he still going through the suffering?
Yes. First of all, going back, you know, silence is probably the most important feature of Meher Baba's advent, and to me, it was inevitable. It was obvious that he had to do that. He began his silence there at the Jopti in Meherabad, and within a few days, began writing his secret book. Another thing that was done at Meherabad during the 20s, how important the place is. Baba's life was full of his statements about his silence. And so when we did the film God in Human Form, I didn't want to ignore that. It was very important to deal with the issue of his silence in his own words, in his own way. When Baba dropped his body, it seemed enigmatic, the issue of his silence. How to grasp this thing. The Mandali, I will say, were not very interested in going on and on about his silence, although they didn't ignore the issue. The most comprehensive explanation of those early days that I saw was in Mani's last family letter, written 6 months after Baba dropped his body. And point by point, she talks about his silence and the hints he gave and different things. But what I say, as Baba has made it abundantly clear, that he broke his silence and the word was released when he dropped his body. But the effect of that in time and space was not perceived in the gross world. Our paradigm of time is false. It's false. I believe that on the higher planes it was experienced. But due to his own compassion for humanity, there is a delay in the reaction of manifestation of the breaking of his silence. That will happen at the right time. But as he had said, especially during 54-55, when that was the subject, the final declaration through the final decision, in order for humanity to tolerate all that has to happen, he had decided to extend the time element. And that's what we're witnessing today. An extension of the time element to make it gradual so that humanity will be able to tolerate it. And it is so ironic to me that the very humanity he suffers for goes on ignoring and humiliating his presence. Okay. Eventually, no, it will happen.
Most of the people here in your presentation are either Christian or Jewish. And spreading Baba's message of love is very difficult verbally. Come to find that out. I run into a lot of arrogance on the part of people that I have met over the last 40, 50 years. Always seem to know, they think they know what God does. And my question basically is, do you have any information that you accumulated over your years with Baba regarding Jesus and the people around him and who they were, what they were in regards, that could act as no, I hate to use the word buffer, but as a bridge to keep the conversation, if there is one, going, where they don't get offended. And I had a recent encounter with an elderly gentleman who's really a seeker, and I all I did was to give him Baba's name and asked him to go look up on YouTube. And he came back the next week when I saw him. He said, I can't believe someone who says he's God.
Of course.
Yeah. And I'm wondering what information. I know that Markar has done a lot of research on Jesus. I haven't talked with Markar in many years. But what information can you afford?
Well, you know, the few bits of information that Baba revealed about the advent of Jesus, people who have studied those things know them well. Was in August of 1925 that Baba revealed that Jesus did not actually die on the cross. And Padre, who was there, told me that Bob explained it that since Jesus was stationed on the fourth plane, he just stopped his body for 3 days. Now people shouldn't be misunderstanding the point that Jesus stationed himself on the fourth plane means that whenever the avatar comes, he works from a specific plane. It won't be any advent will not be lower than the fourth plane. The fourth plane is utilized because of infinite power, and Jesus used the fourth plane to do miracles, perform miracles. He said that there were two purposes for Jesus. Bob explained this. There were two purposes for Jesus performing so many miracles. One is that humanity in general was so proud and pompous that they actually needed to be shocked out of their mental attitude. And this was the only thing that would do it. He said the other thing was a practical concern. It was that medical science was not very well developed there. So to help people, he did cures utilizing the supervening powers. Bob explained this beautifully in one of the essays in Beams on the Spiritual Panorama, supervening powers of the universe, something like that. In actuality, there are no miracles for God. There's no miracles. It's all an illusion. It's through infinite knowledge, a manipulation of the right thing at the right time. So there's not really a miracle per se. There's a direct control. Being the highest of the high has direct control over all the supervening orders of the universe. That being said, Bob had explained that the most efficient way, the most productive way for the avatar to work is to not make use of those things, to only use infinite knowledge and using his own infinite suffering to accomplish the work. Infinite power interferes with the effect. So he generally doesn't use it. There's no point in that. It would be counterproductive to his own purpose to go on doing this. The problem with Western religion in general is it is very, I'll say frankly, superficially oriented. It's either miracle mongering or religious materialism, or I see the essential problem in Abrahamic religions, aside from the few esoteric branches, which are very few, as a failure to consider and contemplate the infinite unitary nature of God, to have some cross-section of humanity that gets condemned eternally to the dung heap of humanity. What is that? It's not that easy for God. So I repeat Baba's statement. All must suffer because all must be redeemed.
Yeah.
For those people who are in religion, they're not ready. I'm not concerned about telling people who aren't ready. It's frankly a waste of time. There's no point to it. And oftentimes, even people who consider themselves as theologians are really more enamored with the mental gymnastics of theological debate and not getting to the truth. A seeker of truth is somebody totally different. It's unfortunate that many of the good examples in Christianity have been dismissed. The Protestant movement, unfortunately, has thrown the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to Christian mysticism. Mm-hmm. This kind of business of making a show is not mysticism. That's not it. You had great examples in the past, and there have even been some in the 20th century, but they get ignored, even embarrassed by the Catholic Church, who these people were kind of, you say, they were from that background, but I say the failure of the Catholic Church to me in modern times, besides this issue with child abuse and covering up the crimes of priests, is that they became embarrassed of their mysticism. It didn't fit in the modern secular scientific world. So they covered it up. They shoved a Padre Pio to some kind of little chapel in the mountains in southern Italy, and this is the fate of the modern world. Mm-hmm. The fate of the modern world.
Teilhard de Chardin was sent out to the Gobi Desert.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Bishop Sheen I loved.
Mm-hmm.
In New York, they dumped him up in Rochester and said, don't. Yeah, he had a great loving effect on the people in New York City where I grew up. And it was a sad thing to see him dismissed. He should have been actually made a cardinal, but he was too much of a threat to the power structure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Telfair, you still have your question?
You mentioned Baba's secret book. Any more that you could say about that?
So Baba wrote that book during that short 17-month period that he was communicating by writing at Meherabad. The book was written at Meherabad, and it was kept secret. It was kept in a metal box that would be carried around by the Mandali, and Baba would keep that key on a string around his neck. It was carried around to places for years, went to Europe, America, different places. There was great meaning in it. As you know, Baba only allowed a few people to read a few pages. Adi even had a look at a few pages, but all he said it was, I can't remember. It was disappeared from my memory, my mind. I don't remember even what the words were. Of course, during that same period, Baba was giving beautiful explanations which came to be gathered by Vishnu mostly as the intelligence notebooks, which have been edited by Ward Parks and Meherabad Jesawala into the book we have, Infinite Intelligence. It's a great piece of work. It's the earliest great epic piece of work we have on the explanation of spiritual universal function. It's a little bit different than God Speaks. I see Infinite Intelligence, the work that it's become, as an explanation of how God comes into creation, and God Speaks is more of the story of the soul in creation going back to God. But they're both similar in many ways. But some subjects that you won't find in God Speaks are there in Infinite Intelligence. And likewise, Baba, for his own purposes, went to this theme of the soul going back to God in the later years. In God's Hand, the book that was published as In God's Hand, is only a one-day discourse. What is it, 29, 39 pages? I don't recall. Baba did all that like this. It is the one surviving discourse we have from the intelligence notebooks that show us two things: the extent, the volume of a discourse that Baba would give in one sitting, and the depth of the material. It's very fascinating. There's no doubt who did it. First of all, because it's in Baba's hand, but nobody else could do that. Nobody else could give that. At one point, a year or two after Baba had finished writing his book, one of the Mandali said, Baba, why don't you publish your book? If you publish your book, people will read it and they'll know, and they'll be convinced, and then all of this will be over. And Baba said, what would they read and what would they understand? The real thing is that humanity must be prepared to receive this. So the way I look at it is, he said, otherwise they'll not understand what it is. I look at it as this: even if we never see this actual secret book of Baba's, it was his act of fasting, keeping silence, boxed up in a small space in that table cabin, writing this, that is going to produce the inner effect in humanity that will be, over the years, the preparation of humanity to develop the ears to hear this. They must first develop the capacity to listen, to hear, and to understand what Meher Baba is talking about. I don't say there's no purpose in it. There's great purpose in it. But what he's after is getting a broader audience. As Prakash was saying, and what Baba was intent upon was that he said, humanity must feel my word. It must feel my word. And that preparation time is the crucial thing. Humanity must be made to feel the import. That's it. So, yes, Baba said, anyway, 90% of the book is in God Speaks, and he said 10% of Bao's Nothing in the Everything is from the book. The other 10%, I believe there's more information than that. Whether we ever see it, we don't know. Baba said it would happen. Let's see what happens.
Ann and I had the great good fortune to go to India in November, this past November, and had an eventful trip. And it was wonderful to have that chance to be there in India with such a short time before everything closed down with the virus. I'd like to preface this by saying that it had been 7 years since we had gone to India. We went in 2012. And at that time, just about the only Mandali member left was Meherabad. So at Meherazad, it was wonderful to have that opportunity to get to know him, and that was a real treat. But it was already certainly feeling, I could feel the difference between going to Meherabad at that time versus in the earlier years when many of the Mandali were still there. So it was feeling more like getting close to that post-Mandali period that you're talking about, Peter. And then when we went back this time, it was all the Mandali had passed away, of course. And for me, that feeling of that attraction of going to Meherabad was not the same as it had been. Without the Mandali there, it was not quite the same. It's wonderful to go there and visit Baba's bedroom, but it's not the same without all the Mandali there. But at the same time, what I felt was a tremendous sense of Baba's presence, even stronger than before for me, at the Samadhi, that it was a wonderful experience of Baba's presence there. Every single time that I went to Arti, morning and evening Arti, I would really feel Baba's presence there very, very strongly. And so it's just been, it was a wonderful experience of his presence there. It was like being close to the generating point for Baba's advent there. You want to add anything to that?
No, she had a question.
So I was just wondering how you feel about that, the sort of that change from equally being attracted to Meherazad and Meherabad, and in this post-Mandali period of time, that it seemed to me like that focus has shifted there. For me, it really, the focus was now on the Samadhi. I was just wondering how you feel about that.
It's your subjective experience, and it's probably a subjective experience that is shared by many other people. Personally, I think I'm probably too close inside the bubble to have that kind of an experience. We've been involved with the function of Meherabad for so many years that it's just going from one home to another when we go back. I love to go to Meherabad because of the atmosphere. Just a wonderful place. I like the trip there less and less as I get older. Trip back there and back. But mostly it's because we're preoccupied with the work that's going on at Meherabad. Baba's the same for me, regardless of where I am there. So I don't say anything like that, but the focus will, as I say, mostly be on Baba's Samadhi in the future, but Meherazad is also very important. I will say this much. We are all making a great effort to preserve the historic portions of Meherabad, as they were in Baba's time, as far as possible, and in some cases improve those things in small increments. So that work is being done very diligently by the people who are involved there.
Peter, can you hear me?
Yes.
Whoa. Hey, Peter, it's really great to see you. I have a question, and you kind of answered it, but about the original structures. And you know, in Mecca, many of those buildings have been destroyed due to the expansion of hotels and parking lots. Even I know you just touched on that, but if you could dilate a little more on that, and what maybe we could do to help that. Also, but importantly, do you think Meherabad and Meherazad should become like more independent municipality, or consider some sort of city-state sanction to
Well,
protect it?
that may happen naturally in the far future, but at this point, they are as they are. The world demand will make, well, there'll be two things. There'll be the world demand, and there will be the political, governmental climate in India that will determine those factors as far as what Meherabad, Meherazad will become in the future. And world demand means the volume of people who will be coming there in the future. They won't be able to be turned away by the Indian government. You know, I'll give you an example. During the East-West gathering, Baba more than once told everybody there, you see here a crowd of thousands, but really this is just a family gathering. In the future, these few people from Iran you see in the future, when the Iranis really get me, they get the whiff of me, he said, like that. When the Iranis get the whiff of me, he points to the Americans and the Westerners, they won't need passports and visas. They'll just storm the border and come. And they won't be stopped. So these are things that Baba had said would happen in the future. About it really, because of Baba's statements, we are also trying to be very diligent about staying up to providing at least a good infrastructure for Meherabad before these big crowds come. Whether the superstructure happens in our lifetimes or pilgrim facilities get greatly developed, we can't say, but there must be water, sewage treatment, electricity. There must be roads and paths. Those things must be there to allow the proper function of Meherabad as a place of pilgrimage.
I have a question.
Okay.
Peter, I've been interested in reading about what apparently transpires during the 100 years following the Avatar's dropping of his body. And there are apparently some things yet to happen within the 100 years of Baba's dropping his body. And I wonder if you could speak to any of the things that you understand are likely to happen in the remaining years that we have during this 100-year period.
Some I will and some I will not yet. But the thing to understand is that Meher Baba is not dead and gone. The continuation of Baba's work, which he released when he dropped his body, is being done by the spiritual hierarchy headed by the 5 perfect masters of the age. This period of grace of 100 years that follows this avataric advent, because as Baba said he would come back after a 700-year period, is also important because within that period, the first circle of the avatar must get realization. So because of what Baba has said, we know that there are those who will come back. And I said in meetings in the past, Mani used to say to us very casually, like playfully. And Baba said, I have to come back one more time as a man. And we would say, oh, isn't that nice? Not thinking, first of all, what is going to be greater than being Mani Esarani? And at the time, we never thought 8,400,000 lifetimes and you're at the end of the game. This is it. What's going to be? Yes, she will be perfect master. And as well as Erich. As well as Erich, who Mani tells us, and Erich would say the same. Once Mani was in the registration office, standing by Debbie's desk, and said again, and Baba said, oh, I'll come back one more lifetime as a man. And Erich is going to have to come back one more time as a woman. They will both be perfect. Sava Kotwal said that Baba told him that Padre and Pendu would have to come back as perfect master. So there's 4 right there that we know. Now, okay, so they passed away from 82 to 2001. Padre Pendu might already be back in this increment we know as the 2nd perfect age or into the 3rd perfect age. We know the 1st perfect age, odds are it's completely done. That is to say that none of those perfect masters who succeeded Baba's last 5 of the 11th perfect age after Muhammad are most likely in their body anymore. So the 2nd perfect age is completely there, happening. And even then, some of the members of the 3rd perfect age, those perfect masters may have already taken their assignment. We don't know. But these 2, it is the same in every Advent. The 1st age specifically, the 2nd age also, stay hidden from the public view in general. They are active within their circles. And they do their work, but quietly, behind the scenes. But the 3rd perfect age generally is when the avataric manifestation to the world happens. The flowering of the faith begins. And it's interesting because the 1st circle must get realization by that period. So many of these people who will be perfect masters will be working as heads of the spiritual hierarchy, doing that manifestation. But before that happens, there is a critical catharsis that has to happen in the world. Humanity must be made ready. And it has been a very gradual time. Although if we look back from, let's say, those of us who are older, we look back from when we were children, the atmosphere is much different. There is much less oppression. There is much more general openness and freedom of expression. I don't mean libertinism, I mean the capacity to openly and willingly express oneself. It's there. The last meeting we talked about the history of America and this whole process of getting through this catharsis. But it will have to happen. Baba has said as much. And yes, he said things will become bad. Things will become very bad. I remember once Mara on her veranda was telling us, Baba would speak occasionally. He'd mention this time when people in the world would be so hungry they would be eating the bark off of trees. And Mara, who was remembering how she would sometimes, she'd close her eyes and remember how Baba was explaining something. She had her eyes closed and she said, but Baba said, wherever my lovers are around the world, I will just give them all something so they won't starve. There are other things Baba said, but it's not the right time to say those things now. Things will happen. Has to be. Has to be. There has to be suffering. There's no other way. But these last 4 years have been obviously a time of catharsis. And it happens first in politics because politics is very superficial and out in the public. So we see that first. But nature hasn't begun to react yet. Wait till nature begins to react to the unnatural sanskaras of this time. It'll happen. We may be on the other side watching it like that, you know. We don't know. Anything more there?
Well, Jim Frasino typed something into chat. You were almost addressing it. I don't know that you saw it, but he said, after this period of catharsis, these 100 years, can you talk of what will become the results of Baba's manifestation in the world? The new humanity, perhaps?
So yes, Baba has said, and if you want to see that, read Baba's final declaration where he talks about after the destruction of 3/4 of the world, it will herald a time gradually to the next advent where oneness will prevail instead of manyness. And essentially, Baba had stated it beautifully. He brings up that subject in the final declaration, originally to give you a premise on how to understand why this will happen. That subject is oneness versus manyness, and how manyness is at the height of expression now. So yes, the unnatural impressions, the unnatural sanskaras must be destroyed. And only perfect masters can do that in the right time. But there has to be the right series of events for that to happen. And yes, then it'll be a beautiful time. Not where I would not assume that let's say the population on the planet reaches 9 or 10 billion. I would not assume that after there is a destruction of 3/4 of the world, all 9 or 10 billion people are going to reincarnate again on planet Earth. First of all, if Earth goes to a higher spiritual, what do you call it, vibration, those people won't be fit for it. They will most likely take incarnations on the next planet in line instead of coming back to Earth. One, because I doubt that the physical bodies would be available for billions of people. So most likely they will begin taking incarnations on the next planet in line or one of the other planets. Because remember, the whole issue for humanity is inner links. How do the 18,000 planets with human beings get their connections? People have to get birth there so that they develop some connection so that all these people can gradually take their places when the time is right. It's a spectacular game that goes on constantly. So it's like that. But according to Baba, Earth will be the place, and it will be the time of the great spiritual new humanity. New humanity. Baba's discourses are there on those subjects, so we don't have to. He did say that. Phil has a question.
I remember seeing Pendu, and he's reading the paper, reading the news, and I don't know if it was he who said it or Baba had said it. He's reading the bogus news, okay? So for us today, we read the paper, we watch the different news channels, and then we also hear about conspiracy theories. And it gets very upsetting if you pay attention to it, all the different information coming in. and we know that we need to focus on Baba, and that's all illusion. But what do you think about all this information coming in from all these news sources and also all these conspiracy theories that just are so opposite to what we are hearing on the daily news?
The last message I read in the last meeting that Baba gave in 1947, essentially Baba was saying, in any of these paths of life, base your discernment on one thing. Does that way seem to be one of selfishness or selflessness? Selfishness or selflessness? Our discernment for all of these things must be based upon this. He said that's the key to knowing whether these are really altruistic motives or not. The issue with news, this was inevitable. What's happened with humanity is that technology in the world has advanced tremendously, but human morality can't catch up with that. People with their bats and scars have just learned to take new opportunities to exploit. People believe things because they want to believe things. And that might be odd coming from somebody who claims that they follow somebody who says he's God in human form. But what the difference is that we have not abandoned critical reason in our relationship with Meher Baba. Yes, we do not have subjective spiritual experience like agnostics would claim. But we have seen people who do. So objectively, we base our subjective experience on the undeniable evidence of these persons, the high musts, who would, so many of them, who would spontaneously proclaim who Meher Baba was and what he would do. And one of those musts said, the time is coming when he must reveal himself to the world, and there will be a great conflagration. For how can the people of hell mix with the people of heaven? One of the high musts Baba contacted said that. So, yes, conspiracy theories, here's what I say. You know, as Baba lovers, okay, anybody can say anything. And have you ever been accused of something falsely? Is that a pleasant experience? You think that's good? To say that so-and-so said this and this and so-and-so and this happened and therefore this, it amounts to slander. And if you say the prayer of repentance every day and then get involved in group slander, it's still slander. It's slander. Remember, Baba told the women on the hill who were saying about Hitler this, Baba, you're with me? I told you, no backbiting. Not even Hitler. No backbiting. That's a different issue. His circle people, he didn't want engaged in that. It was part of the divine plan, but he did explain to them that all of this was necessary. All of this murkiness about the truth is also part of the time. It'll get worse and worse. It'll get worse and worse, of course. Because it is false. It's all false. Falseness must express. Before the truth can manifest, the false must fully express. It has to happen, and it'll get worse and worse. But as far as we go, first, the discernment between selfishness and selflessness is very important. And then We should not condemn anybody without any evidence. Some things are obvious. Somebody's a blatant liar, they're a liar. That's it. They're lying. They're a liar, and that's part of it. Then use your discernment also. Is it selfish or it's selfless? What is behind all of this? We're not looking for perfect human beings in the world. They're not going to be standing on soapboxes shouting. That's not where the perfect ones are. But to condemn people without evidence on hearsay and get involved in these things, this means this and that means that, after all, as Bible lovers, who's in charge? Do we know? There's a spiritual hierarchy that is executing a divine plan. And there's even, I've heard fears that Bill Gates wants to give everybody injections with nanoparticles that after so many injections will reorganize in the body and meld with the human flesh to create a hybrid of. I should believe this, but I shouldn't believe that there are 4 degrees of contagion possible in the coronavirus. That's just too far to believe that one person can infect one person can infect another. That's too much to believe, but I should believe in the nanoparticles. It's just ludicrous to me because I follow critical reason. So show me the proof. And if you say, well, Bill Gates is really, maybe he is, I don't know, but I wouldn't condemn him without evidence. And I don't say just because he does charitable works, Bill and Melinda Gates, that they're good people, but I don't have proof that they are not because they're involved in this and control the world and all. Look, it's not going to happen. The world is going to be out of control, so don't worry about controlling the world. It's just ridiculous. But the other thing to remember is, remember Baba's statement after the 2 car crashes. Baba's accident was no accident. By getting his bones crushed, Baba broke the back of the material aspect of the machine age. So there won't be artificial intelligence controlling humanity and all of that. It's just sci-fi paranoia. There is a reason that the Avatar took birth and suffered tremendously in this age, and it's not for no reason. The rest of this, it's going to go on expressing itself, but so much noise. It's just so much noise. That's my opinion on that subject. Any other questions?
I do have a question.
Oh, Tony, okay.
Hi, Peter. Peter, I'm trying to remember the 4 pillars of Meherabad. Padre Vishnu?
Vishnu, Pendu.
Okay, Vishnu, Pendu, Padre. Who's the 4th?
Padre, Pendu, Vishnu. And, sometimes they included Sarosh in that.
Did they?
Yes.
Okay.
But I'll tell you, they were all born in 1903. Sarosh was born in April. Vishnu was born in June.
Okay.
Now, the other one is Adi.
Yeah. Adi.
Actually,
Adi.
Pendu and Adi were born in September, 1 day apart. Although Pendu's date on his gravestone is inaccurate. And the last was Padre, born in November. All of that year. It's fascinating that all of them were born within those months of each other. Adi K, Adi Sr.
Adi, yeah.
After all, his family gave that property to Baba for Meherabad. But he was also very active, as you know, in the history. Adi was also very active in all that went on there. So they were great men. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Peter.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Nice being with all of you today. All right. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Peter, there was a question on the chat box.
Okay.
Peter.
Hi, Jim. Hi, Jim.
Hi. Hi, good morning. Well, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is. No, I send it in the text. I send it in the chat.
Okay.
I'll let you just, do you see the chats there?
We did address your question already, if it was only one question.
No, I heard that. No, I got that. Thank you. No, there was a part 2 to that.
Okay.
Which was just the, I actually mentioned it to you in an email.
Okay.
The idea that just the comparison between what, you know, the old biblical predictions about the final days, the end days, the horsemen on the, you know, the 4 horsemen, the white horse rider with the sword. How similar are those descriptions, and do you see any parallels to those descriptions with what's happening now and Baba's?
I will say this much, since we've been discussing some of this in terms of religion. As Baba said more than once, trying to find these answers in old religions is like archaeological expeditions looking for answers in ancient digs. Whatever the meaning of the symbology of 2,000 years ago was in biblical context, I'm not trying to find ways to validate Meher Baba according to that. Not necessary. Baba spoke in direct terms. He didn't need agents through symbols to tell anything, to give anything. He's told us directly what will be, what will happen. A lot of the prophecy that was given by John was relevant to the time then, 2,000 years ago. No doubt there may be some that's relevant now, but the whole point of religion is to perpetuate itself by prophecy of the future, and it therefore remains relevant. So in Judaism, for an example, they're waiting for the Messiah, who's already come more than once. And what's the point? Better to get to it. So I don't try to make Baba fit into any of these religious boxes. He's freed us of symbolism, getting caught in the interpretation of that, and trying to be politically correct in religious or social cultural terms.
Peter, Cheryl, and I have a question before you leave.
Okay, Cheryl.
Hi. You said that whether you were in Meherabad or Meherazad, Baba's presence was the same. Baba was essentially, it felt like you were, as if you were saying he was with you. What is that? What is the difference here back in the States?
Well, we haven't mentioned there are many sites around the world where Baba did his work. Meher Center is, as he says, his home in the West. Our most important place of pilgrimage in the Western Hemisphere is Meher Center. I would say behind that probably will become the Heartland Center, where Baba spent 12 days, and he suffered the crash there. When America comes to know who he is and what he suffered, it'll become an important place. There are other places. The Sufism Reoriented purchased Yupon Dunes. Baba spent so much time there. It's good they have that. Avatars of both.
It was more personal. Is there a difference for you personally, working here, being here in the United States, as opposed to being and working in Meherabad and Meherazad? That was really my question.
Less and less as years go by.
Less and less what?
Less and less difference as years go by.
Uh-huh.
I mean, what are we doing? We're here to serve the one who serves the universe. So So every day I've been spending these last, going on a few years while we're in America. We have a nice project here in Asheville for the archive facility.
Oh yeah, no, I know.
So we're working on that.
The reason I ask is that for me personally, I don't focus on anything but Baba when I'm in Meherabad or Meherazad.
Mhm.
It's amazing.
Yes.
When I come here, my focus is not all on Baba, and if I added it up, it's my house, it's the garden, it's taking care of this. It's just, it's very fractured. So I was just curious, and you all are doing incredible work up in Asheville with the archive building, and it makes me very, very happy. I just thought personally, in terms of your own inner sense of self in the world, of the atmosphere around you.
Yes, but remember this. Yes, worldly distractions get us. The worldly responsibilities are there. Number one, we have to be responsible, but at the same time, strike that balance to not take all this worldly stuff so seriously. We do our best, and then that's it. We can only do that much. And behind it all, if everything is for him, then we're not outside of the realm. As Baba has said, the best way to God is to live a natural life in the world, but be not of it. If we can accomplish that, it's very good. And for that, sometimes we have to forget about our feelings and just think of him. That's it. We just have to get beyond it. It's becoming more and more difficult in a world that seems to be, in some ways, disintegrating. But then, wait a minute, we've been waiting for that to happen. So, okay. That's what's happening. As the world disintegrates, we will get closer and closer to this new humanity that Baba talked about. It has to be a constant expression of the false. The false is noise, up front, rushing to express itself. The truth is always there, behind, beneath, in silence. But before the truth can manifest, all this false has to express itself, has to be done. Okay.
Thank you.
Jai Baba, everybody.
Jai Baba.